Welcome, everybody. And I'm one of your hosts, Jose Garcia, to Health AI Agents. What does it take to succeed? And we're going to be starting in about 2 minutes. And we're just letting people in. And I want to just set the table a little bit before we bring on the panel. And why are we doing this event? And a lot of it comes down to the questions we had in the previous event. And a lot of them, actually, almost all of them, were how from early stage founders or people at the beginning of a project. And they're very concerned about how to succeed, basically, with this at the very beginning. And I've also had a lot of conversations with people in healthcare who feel this is all happening really fast and there's a bit of uncertainty when it comes to agents. There's a bit of confusion, and this is happening faster and it's more complicated, at least they feel, than they're used to when it comes to digital transformation. So that's the why. I'm going to bring on our panel now. And I'm going to bring Shahinyan. And you know what? I'm so pleased you're here. I think you were in the first webinar I ever produced. I don't want to say when that was, but you were in the second one. But Anna is a theoretical physicist by education, and she is our data expert. And I know you do a lot with imaging and data readiness. And how have I done a good job of introducing you?
Yeah, thank you, Hassan. Happy to be here and thanks for the invite, and happy that everybody has joined and find the time to be here with us. So I am CEO and co-founder of FiveBrain. At FiveBrain, we are building data auditability ecosystem that helps to build the AI solution in particular medical imaging domain. Thank you.
Thank you. And Megan Kane. Megan's actually, when I met you, you were actually in the same town where I went to university, but I think you've moved now. Megan she wears a couple of hats. You talk a lot about quality, regulatory, using creativity to find a pathway. And you're also curating a community of startup founders in digital health. Have I done a good job of introducing you, Megan? I probably
Yeah.
missed.
Thanks, Jose. You have, like you said, I'm in quality and regulatory as my background, and now I run that digital health incubator. So we see health AI startups all the time, and I love seeing them at all stages of development.
Okay, now I'm going to bring on Archana. And it was like, I met Brian Litton last year. He spoke in one of my webinars, and then like through a chain, I met you. I'm very glad I did. And I've never hosted you on a panel before, but when I met you, I was like, you talk differently. I mean, you talk about different things than, and I thought, I've never heard someone say the word Ubuntu to me in the meeting. And I thought, brilliant. And you've worn so many hats, I don't know how to introduce you.
So yeah, I started my career right ground up. So I've worn many hats, but at the heart of everything, I'm a humanist and a technologist all rolled into one. And currently I serve in the role of principal of AI and health in digital health strategy at Sawgrass Advisory. So thank you for having me and trusting me on this call today.
Oh, you know what? There's a lot more people in this webinar than the first one we did. I think we might get 200 people popping in, which is great. And I'm marketing, so I love things like that. Gazenfer, welcome. And I was in the last webinar, and you talked a lot about technical advice people need to think about before they start. And you built a lot of these solutions yourself. I'm doing a terrible job of introducing you, Gasenfer.
No, you did great. I think I think you got to the core of it, what this webinar is about and what this audience is. So you don't need to give the traditional intro. Yes, so I run a healthcare software development company, Technology Rivers. We work with health tech companies, healthcare organization, helping them build HIPAA compliant software. That includes AI, automation, AI driven healthcare applications, AI agent development. So all we will talk today, that's what we do. And do check out the last webinar, which was AI workflow is emerged, because that's all about like why is that this important in terms of building and creating a differentiation in your business.
I'm going to put a replay link to the last webinar in the comment section of this event as well. Now, why? Can we start with strategy and vision and go through? And because, first of all, I want to ask, why is strategy and vision important when we're talking about this, about agents and workflows? First of all, is it? I'm assuming it is. So I'm asking why.
Yeah, I can take that, Jose. Absolutely. 100%. If your vision and strategy doesn't align, as far as agents are concerned, to the bigger vision and strategy, you're going to land up operationalizing and solving for the wrong things. So it's as simple as that. And your vision and you have to believe in your vision 100%. It has to be a creative expression of what you want to do and what novel idea or solution you want to bring into healthcare, and then back it up with these agentic AIs and other technology to back up your vision. And it's as simple as healthcare is a very high risk area. You're dealing with people, you're dealing with people's care, and you're trusting agents to make some decisions. And when you have several agents in the mix, you have to be very clear on exactly what you're trying to solve and what you want the outcome and output to be. And hence strategy and vision, very important in the planning phase.
And thank you for that. And now I want to talk about the confusion, because I actually had a meeting today with a health economist in the NHS, and I was asking her about this. The uncertainty, the confusion, and there's different kinds of automation. There's AI agents, there's agentic systems, and there's multi-agent systems. Before we go into what those are, why do people need to understand the differences between them? Why is that important? And then if you can explain a little bit about what those are. And Zenford, do you want to take that?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, that's the core of it. And that's a very common question I get asked. Okay, is it automation? What is agent? Like everybody talk about it, but not everybody's really familiar with it. So in simple word, automation, it just follows rules. So you can do same thing every time. It works whenever the path is predictable. Now, AI agent can also follow the rules, but they understand the goal, they make decisions, and they take actions on your behalf. So instead of following a script, they are just based on the input the user are giving. Agentic can go even further. They can plan, they can reason, and they can break goals into steps. So they don't want you to tell what the next steps are. So they are more intelligent agents, I would say. And multi-agents are really, it's more about combining these agents into working together. There are times where you may not want to create one big agent, so you may want to break down into many different agents and then create a whole flow of that. It's just like any other, like you creating just in a traditional development as well. Like you create different components and then route them or do different things based off of that. So
Now, thank you for that. Whenever we introduce new automation, one of the first questions people have is, oh, what about compliance? And Megan, I want to ask you, why might organizations think about compliance and data security and privacy differently when agents are connected to sensitive systems? I'm assuming they should.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. That I think we all know that healthcare data is among the most sensitive data that exists. So the responsibility for things like security and privacy and compliance are, of course, going to be higher than you'd see in typical SaaS. So I would recommend for those teams to be thinking about security and privacy and compliance as your core design requirements, as opposed to thinking of it as some final check mark or assessment to do after you've developed your agentic system. So firstly, I recommend teams to start with a really clear understanding of which rules even apply to them specifically, because not every AI tool needs to comply with the same regulations and standards, or even the same sections from those standards. So I think it's really helpful to connect with someone who not only knows what those standards are and which ones are relevant, but also knows how to read between the lines of the expectations that regulators expect to see. So knowing someone who understands those compliance frameworks, I think, can help you navigate that really well. And then once you know what applies to your solution, then that becomes the baseline for an explicit product requirement that you can then develop against and validate with each update to your model. And that way you're always staying compliant and avoid any legal repercussions, even through every change that you experience. So it sounds like a lot to have to consider, but I think as long as you consider it early in development, then you shouldn't have a problem.
Thank you, Megan. How is an AI agent different from a regular AI model or a chatbot? Anna, do you want to take that?
Yeah. So everything like AI model is a generic concept and technology that is top on everything, and we use it for building agentic models and also like chatbots. So here we need to distinguish between chatbot and AI agent. Chatbot is like you are chatting with it, asking and retrieving question. As Saber mentioned, AI agent is performing actions based on the given input. But here I would like to add one more point regarding standard automation is we are using when we have a low complexity and low variability, while AI agent we use when we have high complexity and high variability. That is also from the technical point of view what we need to consider while looking into development and having building the vision of the solution.
Thank you. Giuseppe, do you want to add anything to that?
I think Anna covered, but yeah, so in simple, chatbot and model, they give you answers to whatever you are asking. So I also treated that like it's, so the, if saying chatbot and model, they'll do a job. You like, for example, summarize an email, right? And then agent can be a lot more complex. It can have routing, it can have flow. So for example, the same email, instead of saying, okay, summarize, it would say, okay, let's say read email, go to my folder, do XYZ. It can do different things based off of those. It can make decisions for you. So that's where the agents are more smarter. It could do more than just answering what you're asking.
And Megan, if I can circle back to you, because healthcare organizations or even digital health startups, when it comes to this space, they're doing more, it seems like they're doing more partnering than maybe companies did a couple of years. That's just my opinion. I could be wrong. And a lot of times people really need to evaluate the how reliable their partners are or their vendors are when it comes to HIPAA compliance and model transparency. Do you have any advice?
Yeah, my advice would be different for each company because what's considered good enough for a vendor is not going to be the same for everyone. I would say you have to think first about what regulatory requirements you are responsible for. Because whether you're building something in-house or you're relying on a third party to create it for you, like whether that's a software component or infrastructure or even just a testing tool, you as the end manufacturer don't get to outsource that responsibility for the overall compliance of your end product. But even if a supplier isn't, say, SOC 2 or ISO certified, that isn't necessarily a deal breaker. I coach a lot of companies to think about vendor selection as a spectrum. So if you're over here on one end, meaning you're high risk, if your solution fails, you're dealing with major patient safety issues, then your suppliers need to stay relatively close to you on that spectrum in terms of how high quality and how regulated they are. But if you're a little bit further down that spectrum and if your solution fails, the worst case scenario is that people are a little bit irritated, then you have a lot more space to work with and you can go for the more cost-effective suppliers that maybe don't have that same level of compliance. But if I were to give one tip for evaluating, especially with things like HIPAA compliance and transparency, it's key to see right away how transparent that supplier will be with sharing their documentation with you. It's one thing for them to say that they're HIPAA compliant, but are they actually showing you their BAAs or their other data processing agreements? Are they sharing their retention and their deletion policies? Do you have visibility into their audit logs? I think as our society is moving towards, in general, having a greater expectation for transparency of our AI models, you don't want to find yourself bound to a vendor who isn't willing to provide that transparency to you right from the start.
Thank you, Megan. Okay, I'm going to get deeper into this topic. And we actually talked about this a little bit in the previous webinar. We were talking about workflows and how can organizations, because some people are like, oh, okay, I've got a workflow, I want to automate it, so I'm going to use the best AI technology there is. How can organizations decide whether a process is best handled by an agent, traditional automation, or a human in the loop? And do you want to start us off on that question? I want to go around the table on this one.
Absolutely. Yes, I would love to take that. I've had in-depth experience in the healthcare world, both payer and provider side. And all that experience comes to mind when you ask this question. So when you have to make a decision of yes or no, 0 or 1, white or black, right? Those kind of deterministic decision making, rule-based decision making is traditional automation. We're all familiar with it. We've used it all these years before agentic AI agents became popular. I will keep the most complex for the last. So the second thing is agents, right? You have complex reasoning, autonomous decision making, orchestration across various domains within the healthcare ecosystem. I would say let's go with agents. But the most important is the human in the loop. And I would assign the most high risk, ambiguous input and complex situations which requires empathy, judgment. That would require human in the loop. So if we have to bring it all together, I'll give an example of a project I'm currently working on without giving too much detail. So let's say taking all the medical information in, connecting it with all other policy related documents, putting it all together and extracting what is required, particularly important to that surgeon who's reading the medical records, I would employ automation plus agents. But the decision making on exactly what is the treatment to be offered to this patient would be the human in the loop, in this case, the surgeon. Hope it helps answer the question. Can't
Yeah,
hear
I
you.
think I will add that I think Archana, you already pretty much covered everything. Thanks. So I think in healthcare applications, human in the loop is really important. The models currently, we still see a lot of hallucination. So yes, the decisions could be made, but the recommendation is that you still want to have the human intervention and lastly review before I would say finally releasing it. So I think most of the applications that we are building, pretty much everywhere we're adding the human intervention at least at one step.
Jose, you're on mute, I think.
Sorry about that. No, I want to ask you a question, Anna. What signals indicate to you, because I know you deal with a lot of sensitive data, is a process is too sensitive or too ambiguous for agentic automation?
So when we have when decision that should be made has high clinical or legal impact, that is one aspect. And the other one is whether, particularly in medical domain, we have many cases when experts disagree. And when the experts disagree, we cannot even train AI models. So in that case, we definitely go ahead with like humans only. That is, and from the technical point of view, when we have incomplete and poor structured data, or we have very rare cases, the outliers, the data that we have, outliers are mostly we have outliers other than some typical patterns that we can train AI with that.
Thank you. Now, I think a lot of people are talking about innovating safely. I've heard actually this expression when we talk about innovating safely. People will say, we're flying a plane and we're still building it. How can, and I know a lot of people are looking at this now, RAG, how can retrieval augmented generation, or RAG for short, PHI anonymization or sandboxing help balance innovation and safety so that people can fly the plane while they're still building it? Zanford, did you want to touch on that one?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about first the RAG. So RAG, retrieval augmented generation. So this is the concept we talked in the last webinar as well. So whenever you have a sensitive data, whenever you have your private internal data that you don't want to be exposed to LLMs. So right now, obviously, everybody just load the data into AI and ask AI for all the answers, yes, but then that data is by default trained by the LLMs. So even if it is not, still, when you have a lot of data, so for example, you have thousands of those documents and you want to make those decisions off of that. So there will be a lot of hallucination. So to avoid that, there's a concept called RAG. This is where you keep your internal data into your internal database, let's say a vector database. So you still use LLM for certain things, but you filter the results based off of your own data, and then LLM would query based off of that. So that's the concept where you are really using the internal data to get the data out of your LLM. So it's a combination of your own internal data as well as the LLMs. And then it's not getting all the public data, so less hallucination. So that's how you improve the quality of the data as well. So obviously, RAG would limit what your model sees by giving it only the data it needs to see at that moment. So the data in your vector database is all the millions of records that you have. So it would limit the data, and then LLM would do the search off of that data. So that's how the RAG process works. Now, you still need anonymization in many cases. So you have a PHI data for doing the development, doing the testing. You don't want the real data. And even when you're giving it to LLMs, there is no need to give everything. For example, you can say male, 60-year-old, has XYZ, this ethnicity, all of that, without giving any specific PHI data. So you can anonymize that. So it would allow you to do testing, development, everything, iteration, without exposing your PHI. And sandboxing would just doing the experiment again in your test environment, using the anonymized data. And even in that case, obviously, you will never use the real data, even if you're using a real name. Those are more of a dummy. So yeah, but if you combine all of these approaches, that would reduce your risk. It will protect the patient data, and that would allow teams to innovate faster without waiting for the perfect data set.
Hannah, can you give some advice about people, in addition to what Pepper just said, about balancing innovation and safety and flying the plane while you're building it? Because a lot of people, you can give people these explanations of, but a lot of people, they feel a little bit uncertain and a little bit intimidated by this. People I talk to. I wonder if you can give some advice. Archana? Can you hear
Oh,
me?
sorry. Yes, I'm here. Yeah, safety when it comes to healthcare is all about protecting the patient data. And it starts with that. And when we're talking about innovation, we have to really be mindful of what kind of data are we loading into the LLM, what kind of information is being consumed by the agent, and how are we ensuring that our patient data is protected throughout the data's journey through these layers and these agents that have been coded. Not only that, when it comes time to audit, we should be able to audit the data's journey across your organization. So as you're innovating, and Megan would also agree to this, I'm sure, is protecting the data is of utmost importance. That factor has to be built into the design. The data governance, the data protection has to be built into the core design of your architecture.
Thank you. And Megan, this is where does governance live? Because I think, and I'm hearing this a lot, is which team handles it? Is it under IT? Is it compliance? Is it clinical operations? Is it some new person? Or does it have to be some kind of shared function?
Yeah, that's a good question. I get that a lot as well. I think where people get it wrong is that they see governance as a single person or a single job title, or even just a standalone department. Governance, you should think about it like operations or project management or something. It's a broad system for decision making. It's not a single job. It's the way in which your organization sets your policies and assigns accountability, how you manage risks in the way that you develop and maintain your AI. So governance, you can think about it as a collection of the right people and the processes along with that needed in order to make safe and ethical decisions when it comes to your agentic system. So I would always suggest to have at least 4 different areas of expertise that all come together to create this governance team or AI review board or task force or whatever you want to call it. And even if you're a small organization, I think these 4 areas of expertise are really key. So whether that's 4 different people or more or less, it can be different, but you really need these different perspectives. I'd say you need at least clinical operations, so somebody who really understands the patient safety, the actual clinical workflow, how the users will be trained, what sort of human factors, risks you might encounter. So someone who knows that clinical side. You need someone who understands the regulations and the legal compliance. So they know the classification structures, what regulators actually expect, the contracts that you have written for yourselves, your data privacy rules. Then the third person would be that IT security infrastructure type of role. So they really own identity and access management. They understand the networking and encryption that you have in place, your logging and your version control, all of that. And then lastly, with somebody in the data science analytics side. So they own the development of that model, its validation and versioning, monitoring of the performance. I think all those 4 different areas have such unique perspectives, and they own a really critical piece of that overall governance. So in order for it to be done really well, I think all of those inputs need to be at the table whenever you're making important decisions. And I would say at a minimum, those types of important decisions that should be more of a joint group decision should be things like approving changes to your scope, like when you have a new use case or a new requirement, and doing that before those new requirements are implemented. Also, I would say whenever you're reviewing or updating your risk assessment or your hazard log or whatever you refer to it by, definitely in post-market surveillance and monitoring of the AI agent and how it's performing in the field. And then lastly, for reviewing things like incidents and escalated complaints when they come up.
Thank you, Megan. By the way, I just got to tell everybody, point of order, the webinar ends in 25 minutes. And Megan's going to leave us at that point. And we are staying. The event doesn't end. We are going to an after party. And some of you may not know about this, but in the after party, everyone is going to have the opportunity to speak and interact with the panel, say your piece. I know a lot of people, and we're going to get to that, but I just want you to know there's an after party coming. It starts in about 24 minutes. Now, Anna, we haven't heard from you in a little bit, so I want to ask you a question about evaluating. This dovetails nicely with the governance question. Continuously evaluating an agent's performance after it's deployed. And this is a big topic right now in healthcare. There's a lot of them, they've installed a solution, but they're not really monitoring it, and they don't necessarily have a good governance structure over it. How do you continuously evaluate agent performance after deployment? What metrics matter most? And such as accuracy, safety events, human overrides. So how do they do that? What advice do you have?
First of all, of course, it is sensitivity and specificity. Accuracy is the clinical advice correct? That is one aspect that we need for the safety point of view, for the trust point of view to understand. The other one goes to consistency. There is a big instability that in LLMs, in all AI solutions that we have, and we need always to have a reproducibility of the results. The same CT image should have the same diagnosis and should have the same report, the same action should be taken, and each day in all type of sites, diagnostic centers, etc., etc. That is what we need also to make sure. And here again, for example, RAG can also help with having backup RAGs. We can assure with the reproducibility of the results. The other part, of course, goes to auditability, whether we can defend this in a court. That is another aspect. And of course, the most important and underestimated at the beginning is the operational efficiency from the hospitals, how really it helps and how do we reduce the human in the loop. Because if a confidence level of our agentic solutions is low and each case is marked, we need a human review, then of course it reduces the operational efficiency and waste of money.
Thank you. And I want to, Archana, I want to circle back to you. Am I pronouncing your name right?
Thanks for asking. It's Archana.
Oh,
It's okay,
sorry.
Jose. All good.
Very gracious. Archana. When I first met you, you talked to me about Ubuntu. And I thought, I've never asked an Ubuntu question. I want to work that into this event. And now that we're talking about governance and long-term maintenance, and does Ubuntu matter when you're at this stage? How does it help?
Ubuntu, Ohana, all that comes from ancient culture, which talks about the power of the collective, about being a family and being and supporting each other, harnessing your strengths, not focusing on your weaknesses, and as collectively you grow together when you harness on the strengths. So in this particular situation, let's bring it down to AI agents, human in the loop. My background is I work very closely with one of the founders of AI who was working in the whole AI field in 1970s in Berkeley. And he's all about building compassionate AI. And that's my foundation. That's my mentor. That's who I work with very closely. And he talks about compassionate AI and Ubuntu and Ohana, they all flow together. We were talking about the human in the loop. So when we are building these agents, we are building specialists, not generalists. Now, when you're building these specialized agents, you are almost weaving into or stepping on someone's toes who's been doing that job manually. But when you create that Ubuntu culture, the messaging there is human in the loop. You are brilliant. You're going to be doing more of solving for those ambiguous, high risk, complex decision making where you need empathy, the human touch, the judgment. So you are routing the human towards making those highly complex decisions and taking that day-to-day work that he does and creating agents, specialized agents, right? And when you implement this Ubuntu culture in an organization, you reduce the fear factor. Let's talk about the elephant in the room. Everybody's scared of, oh, AI is going to take over my job. You got to address it right away and assign and elevate the human to do the work that is designed to do, that is being human, being resolving for that judgment, empathy, high risk, complex, and ambiguous situations where he can make these decisions that an AI agent can't do. So that culture helps for that organization to grow humans, technology together as a family. So that's my speed on Ubuntu. Hope it sheds more light on where I come from when I design. And I provide strategy and vision for an organization. Always take the human in the loop because they're designed to do more than what we've assigned till date and let the mundane work be handled by the AIs and the agents.
Thank you so much. And you know what I love about that? Now I'm going to have an Ubuntu clip on my LinkedIn profile.
Awesome.
Zenfer, we're getting more complicated. And when things get complicated, I think a lot of people start thinking about integration, bottlenecks, interoperability, and we haven't touched upon that, I don't think, much in this event. Can you give some advice? How do agents best integrate with existing enterprise systems and workflows without becoming a bottleneck in themselves?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the key is to treat agents just like any other service in your organization. The moment you start treating them differently, and your expectations are also different. So yes, they are different, the behaviors are different, but still you want to treat them as differently. So in our normal applications, we use APIs. In AI, yes, we use APIs, but there's another thing called MCP, Model Context Protocol, which I call API for AI, where you can expose your services as MCP, and then you can query just like any other. You can, just like you're querying LLM, you can expose your services as MCP, or you can connect with other services using MCP. MCP APIs, then creating those events and plug into your existing system. So once you do that, then you're treating those autonomous separate systems. And then you want to keep the heavy lifting outside those systems. So rather than just changing all of your existing system and then making it complicated, I would say, in other words, make it loosely coupled, more like a component-based system, so that they are interfacing with each other, not becoming a monolithic application. And then in AI, the most important part is the data. You have to have your data mapped right, because if your data is not right, you're not going to get the right output. And that's one of the challenges we hear all the time. People are expecting that AI is going to do great, you just put anything, but no, it will give you the output of what you're inputting. So your data has to be clean, data needs to be mapped, because AI will give you responses off of what is that. So then the most important part in enterprises is the governance part. I believe Anna or Archana, somebody talked about earlier on the governance part. So the governance is key. So you want to make sure that is addressed from day one. If it's HIPAA, your data contains PHI, that needs to be addressed from day one. This is not something that you could integrate later on. And lastly, I would say, obviously, one of the key requirements for the healthcare HIPAA applications are maintaining the audit logs. So that would help you track and debug anything, what happened to that data. And obviously, security is another important part to make sure those considerations are taken care of. Lastly, I would say the best approach for the enterprises, or in fact for anybody, is you want to start slow. You want to start with one. You don't have to integrate everything at once. Start with one workflow and then start implementing one flow at a time. Once that is done, then you move on to the second one, then the third. You may have seen the resistance in every organization. Change is difficult. People are afraid of AI as well. So once you have one, you will have a lot more buy-in from your team as well, because now people will see that as a productivity. And now people will see it as empowerment, not as a replacement of people. So once it's solving your problem, it's making your life easier, everybody would be willing. So how about just taking that one small workflow, one item that makes one person's life easier, then go to another one, make another one, make that person's life. So gradually you start seeing people will be a lot more excited that, oh, this is something interesting, because now whatever the stuff I was doing in days, I can do now in hours. So the goal is, like, how do we make people more productive, more empowered to do more than, so the same people now feel at the end more excited, oh, I'm achieving so much more. So at the end, it's the people's progress.
Thank you. And Anna, you give some advice. Multi-agent collaboration. How do people think about designing multi-agent collaboration without losing that traceability? Especially when agents depend on each other's output.
Yeah. Of course. So when we are talking about agentic systems, in this case, I would say that agentic systems are mostly more safe rather than single AI models, because they check each other, input and output, not input, but rather output. And there is one point that they are much better rather than maybe single one, of course, depending on the case. As I said, we need to consider the ROI of the given solution, because since we are using many AI solutions, AI models in a single solution, from the cost point of view, it is increasing because at least hardware resources are much more required rather than in a single one. Yeah. But back to the traceability, of course, in this case, we need to have a versioning. We need to log everything. And also this will also help us with understanding and debugging of the solutions, of the solution. And also this again will go with the help of HIPAA compliance and GDPR, whatever compliance it is required, SOC 2 compliance to understand, and also for FDA compliance to analyze in which cases AI model is failing. And maybe there is a pattern where it is failing. Maybe this is about GE vendors are failing. For the GE vendors, it is failing, or it is Siemens vendors, data is mostly failing, performance is lower. But always it goes to versioning with the visualization of the data, of the workflows, or the meta information that we have, and also debugging all these type of use cases that I have described. When it is failing, when it is performing, when we have a data bias, because it is the most unaddressed problem so far that we have, still we are facing. The data bias, it can be either ethnicity bias, gender bias, vendor bias, whatever bias, but we still have it. And back to, I think I didn't mention this. So RAG is a solution for having data access, sensitive data access, because it is not directly involved in the model brain. But the second point that we are for, FibBrain, it is federated training, when the data is not leaving the hospitals or the diagnostic centers, rather the models are traveling, training themselves and taking meta information, the secondary information that is most relevant for them. And yeah, in this case, again, we'll having again more information on the hospital side. And since the whole patient information was there, again, we can have better traceability.
Thank you. And okay, we're going to go to the after party and we're going to do the audience questions. We're going to get to there's a lot of questions in the chat. I haven't had a chance to even read them all. Megan, I know you're turning into a pumpkin in a few minutes. Can you give a final word before you do the Cinderella routine? Sorry, that's Cinderella routine. That sounds a bit hard.
I sure can. I'd say we talked a lot today about trust and compliance and security when it comes to health AI agents. So I would recommend that health AI agents can be most successful when they start off with a very narrow scope. If you go to a pilot or you go to release 25 different functions that your AI agents can perform out the gate, and even if one of those steps fails, it's very difficult, especially in healthcare, to win back that trust. But if you start with only a few core actions and you demonstrate a really high degree of confidence that you are compliant with regulations, you have well-documented policies, you have the right security and safety controls in place, then I think the sky is the limit for you.
Thank you, Megan. Archana, do you want to say something before we go to the after party?
Yeah, the point I want to make is we are seeing a lot of AI agents being deployed, especially at enterprise level. But I would also recommend and advise startups that are in the design phase or architecture phase, think long term. Think long term and break down the work into different domains and create those specialist agents. At least have that in the roadmap, because it's going to, in the long run, be very beneficial for the organization to have that design in place at the thinking phase when you're designing. So that's what I would say, especially to startups. I know enterprises are working on it, But even for startups, think 5 years down the line, 10 years down the line, and build for it, design for it.
Thank you. Anna,
I'm here.
you want to make a little remark before we go to the after party? The after party can be a bit chaotic.
Yeah.
because we have a
So
big audience.
in order to support overall AI in healthcare, we believe that first of all, we need to have AI readiness analytics data ecosystem, which is a minimum for having reliable and safe AI solutions. So analytics is the first.
Thank you. Gazenfer, final word
Okay.
before the chaos begins.
Yeah, thanks. So it takes clear workflows, clean data, and systems that let humans and agents work together without friction. So we talk about it before as well. Your workflows are important. What needs to be built, where you can have agent, where you can have agentic, where you should have automation. A lot of people are unclear on those, and those are not easy options. So those are where the RAG would come in and play. Where you should just buy some of those commoditized agents, right? Which one should go into the private LLM? Which one should you use public? So all those are very sophisticated, complicated conversation that requires a lot more deeper understanding and deeper working. I'll just add a small plug. So we have a workflow process where we look at the company's workflows, maps, bottlenecks, look at all the manual tasks and see where AI can make a difference. How do we unlock the inefficiencies in the business and create more value for those businesses? And happy to chat afterward if anybody has any question on that.
Okay. Now, you know what? We're gonna start the after party just a few minutes early because there's so many questions in the chat that we're not gonna be able to handle them all. So if you guys don't mind, we'll say goodbye to two people now. We say goodbye to Megan, and we say goodbye to YouTube. YouTube's not in the room, but they'll be around later. We say goodbye to YouTube now. So if you're watching on YouTube, you missed the after party. You have to come live to the next event, and then you get to be in the after party. Thank you so much for coming.